Hello, in this short video I want to talk through what we have changed in the 0.20.0 version of Chocolatey GUI. So let's go ahead and jump in. So looking at the release notes, there is a warning there, first of all, that if you are installing this version, then you will also need to install the 0.40 version of the Chocolatey GUI license extension if you're using it. So basically, sometimes when we make a change to Chocolatey GUI, there's a corresponding change in the Chocolatey GUI license extension. If you don't use them both at the same time, bad things happen. So just take a note of that. And like I say, if you are installing in that scenario, make sure to update the Chocolatey GUI license extension first, which will then upgrade to the corresponding version of Chocolatey GUI. The first thing I want to note there is that there is a breaking change in this release, in the sense that Chocolatey GUI now has a dependency on .NET Framework 4.8. This was needed, and we'll maybe come on to it as we go through the features. This was needed in order to support a newer version of MAApps, which is the underlying UI framework that Chocolatey GUI makes use of. So that's why we needed it, and it's listed in a breaking change because it is a change to the dependencies of the package, which we regard as a breaking change. So jumping into it, we allow for passing in package parameters installer arguments when installing a package. Now this is something that folks have been asking for a while, but if we go to the Chocolatey source here, then you've still got the option. So I don't have Flash Player plugin installed, so let's go ahead and click install there. That will do the standard thing, which is to install that package. Okay, now there's lots of package parameters that you can pass in when you're installing something, where you want to pass in a different installation location, whether you want to pass in the Force x86 installation parameter, etc. All of those things you can do at the command line. So if you were doing Choco install, you could then do lots of command line options that you wanted to do. So what we've done is if I double click on Mozilla Firefox here, there's now the install option, which is the one I just did by the right click context menu, but there's also the install advanced option. So this modal window, which I believe you can move around, when there are package parameters that you can pass in to a package, then you absolutely can pass them in here. So I could do -L locale and pass in the specific, that's not actually what you want me to do, it's engb as an example. So you could pass those in as command line parameters through the Chocolatey GUI interface. So again, if you wanted to include pre-releases, if you wanted to force x86, then there's lots of options that are minimized by default, where you can, anything that you can do at the command line, you can now do through this modal window. What I will point out is that as of this release, this functionality only exists for the install command. You can do similar things at the command line when you do an upgrade and when you do an uninstall, but as of right now, we're essentially trialing this feature to then see whether we need to extend it to the other commands that you can do within Chocolatey. This is, like I said, this has been a much sought after feature request. So we'd love to get some feedback on it. So give it a try, see what works, what doesn't work, etc., or what it needs to do in addition to what we've provided. We would love to hear that. So that's that first feature. Allow users to change the locale to use. So by default, previously, Chocolatey GUI would pick up on the locale that's defined at the system. So if we have translations available for, say, German, and you're in a German locale, then all the text within Chocolatey GUI will switch to that. But there are scenarios where your system locale might be one thing, but you actually want to use a different locale. So now under the settings option, if I go under here, you can now select which ones we have available. So if you need Portuguese or Norwegian or Spanish, then you can select one of these from this drop-down list rather than using what's defined in the system locale. Okay, so this is, again, it's been a long sought after feature, but it will automatically switch. So as soon as you select that from the list, it will switch over and be applied. But it will be persisted, so the next time you run Chocolatey GUI, it will remember what you configured within this option up here. The next one that I wanted to mention was provide ability to see persisted arguments for a package. So this is something that folks have asked for a lot, but basically, let's just talk through what it's about. So when you install a application or package through Chocolatey, if you pass in command line parameters, Chocolatey will remember those. It'll crypt them on disk and it'll store them for later usage. So then if you enable the feature which is to reuse those arguments during an upgrade, Chocolatey will rehydrate those and use them during the upgrade. Now, there's a scenario that you can get into where you actually want to see what those persistent arguments are. So that's what this view package arguments button is. So this package I installed, I didn't pass in any command line parameters, but the default one, which is the cache location, was used. So you can look at that and see all the package arguments that were passed in and used at the point of installation to then know if there's something not quite right. So there's discussions around whether we're going to extend this to allow editing of the persistent arguments. Or whether we can allow deletion of the persistent arguments. But for now, this is just for viewing purposes only. Okay, that's what that one is. Provide ability to search or filter features and settings. This is a big one for me personally. The number of settings and features that we have for Chocolatey GUI is starting to increase, and the number of features and settings that we have for Chocolatey is already quite big. So if you wanted to filter now to look for a specific one, then you absolutely can. There's a search box here and over in the settings, so you can filter down to just the one that you're interested in to then change that one or enable and disable that feature. So you can do that both for the Chocolatey GUI features and settings and for the Chocolatey features and settings. I personally really like that feature. Add confirmation dialog for the update all button. The reason that we added this was if you come up here and you press the upgrade all button, which is that one, it can take a while. So depending on how many out-of-date packages that you have, I've got a few in the system. If I were to press that, then Chocolatey GUI would run off and attempt to install all of those things at once. But you might not want to do that because you've pushed the button by accident. So what we've really added is a confirmation dialog that will allow you to say, well, actually, are you really sure you want to do that? And then I can drop out of that package upgrade because I'm not ready for it just yet. Add confirmation dialog when you're removing a source. So that's similar to that one, but if we go into the settings here and we look at sources and then we say, well, I'm going to delete, let's not delete that one. Let's say I want to delete that one, so I can click remove here. You're going to get a dialog there basically saying this is a destructive operation. Are you sure you want to continue? And then there's a no that you can drop out of that as well. And then add confirmation dialog when doing an uninstall, reinstall. It's the exact same thing. So it's basically protecting the user from an operation that could be destructive on their system or have unintended consequences. You're then prompted to say, do you actually want to do this or not? Some bug fixes. Install button is not disabled when installation of packages is not allowed. So really this comes down to when you're using Chocolatey GUI in combination with the Chocolatey GUI license extension, we will respect the operations that are allowed based on what the system is currently configured for. So there's a setting within Chocolatey itself that says when running in background mode, these are the operations that are allowed to be done, and by default that is install and upgrade. But we were not correctly respecting that in the Chocolatey GUI interface. So if I double click on this one, for example, then if I didn't have the install permissions, then this button would still be there even though it wasn't allowed. So we fixed that so that it now correctly shows what operations are available in all scenarios. Message boxes used to report issues often don't stay open. So there was an edge case here where if there was something not quite right in the system and you open Chocolatey GUI, then it would flash a message box that says this was the problem, and then that message box and Chocolatey GUI would immediately disappear. So it was, from a support perspective, you weren't able to provide the information to support or when you were raising a GitHub issue about what the problem was. What we found, and I believe it was Corey on the team that found this, was that WPF has a scenario where essentially the message box isn't instantiated correctly because it was too early in the load cycle. So it shows it and then it immediately goes away. So there's a workaround put in place in order to ensure that we always display that message box so that we can get that information from the user that's having the issue and then move forward. That was that one. All operations on packages with a progress dialog are broken. So this was one of the issues related to Mat apps, and this one came in from Jan, community contributor to Chocolatey GUI. There was a scenario there where, let me remember, I think the issue was that it was an async await issue where we were not correctly awaiting, or we were incorrectly awaiting the result from the progress dialog, and as a result it didn't show any progress dialogues. So Jan was able to fix that for us, so thank you to Jan. Ensure the Wix installer verifies that the .NET Framework 4.8 is installed. So as I mentioned before, we are now taking a dependency on .NET Framework 4.8. So when we run the MSI installer, we needed Wix, which is the underlying technology that we use for the MSI, to know that it should check for .NET 4.8. And that was a community contribution from Nils, community maintainer or community contributor, who added in the necessary steps to Wix to make that check. And if it's not installed, it will provide the opportunity to install that package if you're using the MSI directly. Now, obviously, if you're using Chocolatey, there is a dependency on the package itself, so it will make sure that the necessary .NET Framework is installed. But we also want to put that check in the MSI so that folks installing the MSI directly have the same experience. Order features and settings alphabetically. This is another feature for me was amazing. But if we go back to settings, then all of these features are now in alphabetical order where they weren't before. Because finding features before, just because of the number has increased significantly, it was becoming harder to find the one that you're interested in. So in addition to be able to search for specific ones, you can now look for them alphabetically in the list as well. And I guess that happens in both the Chocolatey GUI settings and the Chocolatey settings itself. Support per monitor DPI. That was the feature or the improvement that necessitated the bump to Mat apps, which necessitated the bump to .NET Framework 4.8. So Chocolatey GUI will now support if you've got multiple monitors and they are different DPI settings, then Chocolatey GUI will now reflect that and do the right thing. Chocolatey GUI doesn't write to the Chocolatey log file. This was an issue that's been there for a long time, but effectively, Chocolatey GUI is a wrapper around Chocolatey. So the intention is whenever you did an operation through Chocolatey GUI, it should still write to the Chocolatey log file. But what we found was that that didn't happen. So when something went wrong and we would ask folks for, well, can you send me the log file? They weren't able to provide that information because Chocolatey GUI was essentially stealing that information and not putting it into the Chocolatey log file. So Kim on the team was able to address that issue, and I believe I'm right in saying that there was an issue both sides. So there was a Chocolatey CLI issue as well as a Chocolatey GUI issue, and both of those have now been resolved. The other issues that were sorted in this release were some documentation ones. We were still mentioning Gitter in our README for the project. Gitter, we don't use that anymore. We use Discord for our community chat now. So we removed the links off to Gitter, encouraging folks to use Discord instead. Fix a link to the localization article. I think that was just in our README again. So we fixed that up to point to the right place. We removed the package parameters from the new spec file. What we were running into was that because of the number of package parameters you could pass in a Chocolatey GUI, when you're installing it, it was bigger than the allowed 4,000 character limit in the description element of the new spec. So it was failing when we tried to push the package. So what we've done now is that information is now stored in the documentation itself. So if we do installation here, I believe, then here are all the package parameters you can pass in and information and examples on how you can do that. That was in the new spec file previously, but there's just too much information now, so we can't show it there, so we show it here instead. And the final one there is the contributing MD has broken links. So there's various things within the contributing.md within the Chocolatey GUI repository that were broken. So we fixed those up within this release cycle as well. So that's it. For me, this is quite a big release. There's lots of features and improvements in there that I really like. So I'm really happy to see those coming through. I'm equally as happy to see that they're coming through as community contributions as well. So thank you to everyone that's been involved in that. But that's all I've got for now. So thank you very much.